Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today this is going to be a two-ish part video. I'm first going to talk about a book which I think changed my life a little, and then two, I will be reviewing another book. When I tell you these books' title, these should then make a lot more sense. I'm going to be talking today about The Scarlet Pimpernel by Baroness Orczy and Rook by Sharon. As you can probably guess, the book which I consider changed my life is The Scarlet Pimpernel. I actually own two beautiful copies of this. By beautiful I mean, this is beaten all to hell. This is my little mass market. It is so beaten that the binding is starting to crack in the middle of the chapter. I believe it's Richmond. And then this hardback is actually by a group known as the Folio Society, and so obviously it comes in a red slipcase. A beautiful hardback with England and France represented by the flags and separated by the guillotine. And it actually does have illustrations in it, but they're kind of funky illustrations. They're very unique. Not all the illustrations are like these in the Folio Society. This book just happens to have them. I think it's really awesome. I love having a beautiful hardback because, like I said, my mass market is beaten all to hell. So let me tell you a story. When I was 13, I was in the 8th grade, I was assigned my first ever book report project. Yeah, I never had to do a book report until I was in the 8th grade. I was a huge reader, so that was never a problem, but I never had to sit there and do a whole packet on a book and like this huge report. What my teacher did was she laid out about 15 to 20 books on a table, stacks of them behind each, like one display copy, and said, go and pick one. Now, she would only allow a maximum of like 6 people per book, because that's how many copies of each book she had. And she said, you can work in a group, or you can work alone if you want. Almost everybody wanted to work in a group. I figured I was going to be working alone, just because I'm such a fast reader, I could go at a faster pace. But I wanted to go up and 1, read a book I hadn't read before, and 2, one that actually interested me. I recognized some of the books. So, for example, Flowers for Algernon was a book that was there, and I'd read that before, so I wasn't going to read it again. And there were a couple others, but my basic idea when I went there was I read about the first couple of pages, in some cases even the first chapter, because I could just sort of skim it really quickly and I would see whether or not it was to my taste. And, I'm kind of hitting them all, and then I figured I'd go back to whichever one I liked, and so far, nothing had really sparked my interest, but I come across this one. And it was a particular paperback edition I've never been able to find again, and I can't even describe it to you, but it was called The Scarlet Pimpernel. And I opened it up, and all I needed was the very first line of the novel, and I was sold. September 1792. A surging, seething, murmuring crowd of beings that are human only in name, for to the eye and ear they seem naught but savage creatures, animated by vile passions and by the lust of vengeance and of hate. Thus begins The Scarlet Pimpernel in the shadow of the guillotine in the middle of the very bloody Reign of Terror. I love that opening sentence. It's got a cadence, there's harsh consonants, there's mellifluous sounds, there's a rhythm, there's a music to it, and I think it helps that this was actually originally written as a stage play by Baroness Orczy, who is the author, and then she later wrote the book. What follows is what for me is kind of the quintessential tale of spies and espionage, of hidden identities, of kind of swashbuckling adventure and, period drama and romance and all these things. I love every aspect of this in The Scarlet Pimpernel. It would be one of those books I would have to save if any sort of library or my house or anything were on fire. I would have to save a copy of The Scarlet Pimpernel. It's one of those books that I think should continue on through generations. Is it the most brilliant thing ever written? No, it's not. But it's a wonderful story with wonderful characters and actually has very successful sequels. It's one of the few where I've continued on with these characters and really enjoyed them. I have a copy of El Dorado, which is the second book in the Scarlet Pimpernel series, and again, probably one of the better known plot lines and storylines involving the character. A lot of film and television adaptations love to borrow from El Dorado, but that's another really good one, and it's just a wonderful book. It's one of the first books that ever really captured me at opening sentence. And it's also one of the few books where I take a copy of it with me everywhere I go. The reason that this little mass market is so battered is because it has literally traveled the world with me. It and my original Folgers Library copy of Hamlet by William Shakespeare have literally crossed countries and oceans with me. I have to always have a hardbound copy of it wherever I go, because I can always crawl back into its pages and visit these same characters and feel the same gripping tension throughout it. Even though I know who everyone is, I know who the Scarlet Pimpernel is, I know whether or not Chauvelin, who's the French agent sent over from the French government to find him, I know whether or not Chauvelin's going to find him. I know whether or not Marguerite and Percy Blakeney are ever going to reconcile. I know all the answers. I know the ending. And yet the story and the mystery and the tension never gets old. And it was a book that, for me, at the tender age of 13, was teaching me about the dynamics of married life. It was teaching me about romance, about dignity, about honor, and about integrity and family, and at the same time giving me a good look at history. I mean, I did a huge packet on this project, and I did it by myself. I finished this book in one sitting. I started it in class, I took it home, and I finished it. I couldn't stop. And I finished the packet in like a week. I literally had like 9 weeks with nothing left to do. I forever hold it in my memory and say it basically changed my life because it is just so good and I loved it so much.
Would you believe me? I've just written a masterpiece.
Who, sir? You, sir?
Me, sir.
No, sir.
Yes, sir. All about this mysterious Pimpernel fellow. How it came to me, heaven only knows, because it was the busiest moment of the day. Damn me, I was tying my cravat. Well, here it is. The Scarlet Pimpernel by Sir Percival Blakeney, Baroness.
What?
Well, that's the title. They seek him here. They seek him there. Those Frenchies seek him everywhere. Is he in heaven? Is he in hell? That damned elusive Pimpernel. What? Not bad. Not bad. It's damn good.
This brings me to Rook by Sharon Cameron. This literally just came out on Tuesday. I actually found it in my Barnes & Noble early, which was really exciting. When I saw it, I immediately had to have it. And I went into this book honestly not knowing anything about it. I'd read the synopsis on Goodreads. That's actually how I found this book. And I said, this sounds an awful lot like a post-apocalyptic Scarlet Pimpernel. And it kind of is. Somebody actually asked Ms. Cameron on Goodreads, this sounds an awful lot like the Scarlet Pimpernel. And she says, it's an homage to the Scarlet Pimpernel. Not so much a respinning or a retelling, but an homage. And there's actually a reason given about halfway through the novel as to why it's an homage. I love stuff like that. It's meta. It's metafiction and it's awesome. Rook is essentially a post-apocalyptic homage to the Scarlet Pimpernel. It is set in a far future France where our culture right now are called the Ancients. I never thought I'd be called ancient in my life, but I kind of like it. It's dignified. And the Great War is whether or not people should be using technology. So most of society has effectually reverted back to these Edwardian, Georgian times, and it's basically the French Revolution all over again. I love it. The beautiful part of Rook is not only that it's a very well done homage to the Scarlet Pimpernel. You can tell that Miss Cameron clearly really loves the Scarlet Pimpernel, and she knew exactly which points to hit. And all the good little nods that are inside it to people who are fans of Scarlet Pimpernel, you're gonna catch every little nod to it in there. Just trust me, I did, and I was loving every second of it. It's not only that, but it also stands as a really good story on its own. The characters are dynamic. They're flawed. Every character's flawed. No character's perfect. The characters in Scarlet Pimpernel aren't even perfect. So, I mean, flawed characters are good. The characters are flawed, but they're fun, and they're dynamic, and I cared. I was worried for them. I wanted to see them happy, but I wanted to see them also succeed. Sometimes those don't go hand in hand. It has a very interesting villain that takes the idea of Chauvelin, the French agent from Scarlet Pimpernel, and really boosts a whole new level to him that I thought was interesting. The level of fanaticism and devotion to this idea of the state he's effectually trying to maintain is taken to a whole nother level when they include a kind of religious element, but it's more almost like a cult-like religious element. That was cool. Great inclusion. I think anybody who studied the French Revolution looks at what happened in the bloody reign of terror in that era of the French Revolution and goes, it was fanaticism, it was like a cult, and it was scary as hell. When we look on it in retrospect, and then to think that it's happening again and that a guy has literally taken it to a cult fanatic level, and you're just like, oh my god. this could conceivably happen. I mean, in some twisted future. Just saying. The Scarlet Pimpernel in this book is replaced by a character called the Red Rook, and I'm not going to say who the Red Rook is or anything else like that, because obviously huge spoilers. I mean, that'd be like telling you who the Scarlet Pimpernel is, so I'm sure anybody could look it up and find out. I'm not going to tell you. If you want to know, go read it. It's not that long. As with the Scarlet Pimpernel, we are following a male and a female protagonist who are, in this case, not married yet, but about to be married, and we see they're not entirely into this whole idea of getting married. They're not digging it so much. One's doing it for money, the other's doing it because he's told to. Just like, oh, well, that's not very romantic. The difference between Rook and the Scarlet Pimpernel is much more of the intrigue. These characters are a little more proactive throughout the entirety of the novel. The thing about the Scarlet Pimpernel is that while Marguerite is a very active protagonist, she's not exactly proactive until close to halfway through the novel. She's a little reactionary for the first half, and that makes complete sense for her character, and it's completely in character, and again, I'm not saying that as a criticism, that's just, it makes sense. Our female protagonist, and really all the characters of Rook, are far more proactive from the get-go of the novel, and that actually is good, considering how convoluted and complex this plot gets, and the betrayals and backstabbings and who's doing what to whom. It's good to have proactive characters. If they were sitting there being reactionary for most of the novel, you would find the pacing really, really slow. This is still a slower novel. It is also a bigger novel than the Scarlet Pimpernel. There's a lot more going on. I think the ultimate question that's going to be asked is, do you have to read the Scarlet Pimpernel to read Rook? No, you don't. Does it help if you've read it? Yes and no. I was dying little fangirlish happy deaths because of all the great references to the Scarlet Pimpernel. But I could give this to someone who's never read the Scarlet Pimpernel, and you know, they might actually get a little more enjoyment out of it because there are elements that kind of won't be spoiled for them. I really, really enjoyed Rook. I rated it a 5 out of 5 because it reminded me of everything that I loved about the Scarlet Pimpernel so much, but had a little bit more steam, had a little bit more edge, and definitely was a little more violent than I remember the Scarlet Pimpernel being. And so I let these two books rest side by side on my bookshelf because I think it's important that when you find a book that really does change your life or change your reading life, finding other things, which are homages or respinnings or just love notes to that same story and do it really well, it's good to find those because it sort of makes you feel like you found somebody else who's in your private little club of this book is awesome and thank you for recognizing it and then doing it really, really, really well. That was really convoluted and doesn't sound like a fun club, I'm sure, but it's a fun club for me. And I need more Scarlet Pimpernel fans because I don't know enough people who've read them. I literally have one friend who has read the Scarlet Pimpernel. One. So yes, I highly recommend reading both the Scarlet Pimpernel and Rook because they are lots of fun if you like kind of period French Revolution, even post-apocalyptic French Revolution, if you like espionage and romance and spies and swashbuckling adventure and all the really good things that make up a classic novel. But that's it for me today, guys, and so until next time, cheers.